Hey, did you know that board games used to come on VHS? When 1980s people weren't busy snorting cocaine off their stock portfolios or twisting their ankles trying to moonwalk, they sometimes played games on their VCRs. 1985 was a crazy year. People were loving New Coke, somebody spilled red wine on the newly installed Soviet leader, and everyone was hoping to get their hands on the latest home entertainment craze that was sweeping the world. No, not that. I'm of course talking about Clue, the VCR mystery game from Parker Brothers. VCR games were a brand new thing, and Clue was among the first ones to be released. The basic format of the game is that you watch a video and then you read and play different cards that give you hints as to who murdered whom in what room using what weapon. It was a really novel idea for the time, and I suggest reading Brian Van Hooker's breakdown of the history of VCR games in Mel magazine for more on the genre. Now, I had this game growing up, and because I didn't have any friends, I never properly played it, but I did watch the video a lot. When you're a kid, you'll watch whatever, whether it's good or not, so I wanted to take a look back at Clue, the VCR mystery game, and see whether the story was really worth all that time I spent staring at it. If you want to check out the video, it's available in full on YouTube, but for now, let's have a look at the plot of Clue, the VCR mystery game. The first scene sets the atmosphere, the classic murder mystery tropes of the dark and stormy night and the mansion. You'll notice on the bottom of the screen scene numbers and the room the action is taking place in. Players needed this information to decipher clues in the game. A cute little Easter egg in the cutscene, and we're thrust into another mystery trope, the dinner party gathering. We have all the Clue regulars from the board game, and the VCR game introduces a couple of new characters later in this scene. We have Mrs. White, the maid, and no one seems at all bothered that Colonel Mustard is just casually shining up his gun as he paces the library. And here's Mrs. Peacock. Does she want to that knife? Next is Mr. Green playing with some rope for whatever reason, then Professor Plum gazing longingly at his cartoonish jar of poison. Wait, how did he get in here? He was in the conservatory like 2 seconds ago. A little exposition follows as Mrs. Peacock explains that they've all been invited back to Body Mansion by Mr. Body's sister, Madame Rose, shortly after his murder. It's heavily implied that one of the guests committed the murder, which is actually the premise of the original non-VHS board game. In the original board game, all the characters are suspects in the murder of Mr. Body, and it's that murder that the players are trying to solve. But in the VCR mystery game, the premise is that Mr. Body has left his estate to one of the characters, and so they go around all murdering each other, and it's those murders that the players are trying to solve. Our cast of characters is completed as Mr. Body's sister, Madame Rose, and his lawyer, Monsieur Brunette, arrive, as well as two strangers, Miss Peach and Sergeant Grey. Sergeant Grey announces that the only bridge out of town is flooded and that everyone is trapped there for the weekend, implementing another mystery trope, the closed circle, wherein all the characters are isolated together and have no contact with the outside world. After the exposition, there is a very, very long explanation of the rules of the game, which I won't comment on except to say that when these games came out, they were criticized for being overly complicated, and we see that in the video because it takes the butler did it. Get it? The butler did it? Almost 10 minutes to explain how to play the game. Anyway, on to Chapter 1, The Will. It's revealed here that Miss Scarlet is a spy, and she's after Professor Plum's formula, but we never learn what the formula is for. We learn that Colonel Mustard is also a spy, but he is really terrible at it because he keeps trying to reminisce with Miss Scarlet about their prior secret missions out loud in a room full of people. We also learn that Sergeant Grey has amnesia, Professor Plum is super into poison, which I guess we already knew from when he was making googly eyes at it in the introduction. Colonel Mustard arranged a hunting accident to kill his older brother so he could inherit the family money, and that Mrs. White has been writing down all their secrets in her diary. We're 2 scenes in, and already there is so much going on. I think it's a testament to the efficiency of the writing that they've managed to cram so much information into only 6 minutes of story. And remember that the players had to remember all of these details because the clues in the game would be things like the character discussing hunting was murdered with the weapon being held by the man in the brown hat, so they really had to pay attention to the details. Monsieur Brunette gathers everyone in the conservatory, and let me pause here to just say that a conservatory is supposed to be like an indoor greenhouse, but this room just feels more like a cramped sitting room with a couple of potted plants. But anyway, Mr. Body's will states that the last survivor of all those present at his will reading will inherit his estate, so that includes Miss Peach and Sergeant Grey, even though they didn't know Mr. Body at all. Mr. Body gets the last laugh, though, because he states in his will that he hopes his friends will all murder each other over his money. What a guy. No wonder one of his friends killed him. The next scene has Professor Plum forget where he is
The kitchen.
while he is fondling his precious poison. A bunch of characters come into the kitchen to help with dinner and casually drop poison into everything they can get their hands on. We also learn that both Sergeant Grey and Mrs. White are colorblind, and remember this fact because it's very important later. Also, kudos to the writers for giving the two colorblind characters the perfect names, White and Grey. Next, Colonel Mustard and Mr. Green try to murder Madame Rose, I guess, and it's revealed that Miss Peach and Monsieur Brunette are in cahoots, trying to get their hands on the body fortune. So before dinner, everyone is stocking up on poison so they can, poison each other, and dinner gets underway. There's a bit of comedy as plates get passed back and forth, and everyone's trying to serve everyone else the food or drink they've poisoned, and holy shit, is that a diamond-studded eye patch? They all realize what's going on and no one eats anything. There's more open weapon brandishing and dinner comes to a close, but not before a little 80s style racism as Miss Scarlet eats her dinner with chopsticks. Did she bring her own chopsticks, or did racist ass Mrs. White just set the table with those at her place? Well, now that that's out of the way, I'm sure that'll be it for the stereotypes.
Maybe we should send out for Chinese.
No.
Some catchy music plays over a weird montage, but honestly, this was my favorite scene when I was a kid because I thought the music was awesome. I'm not sure what this scene is trying to imply, but I do like the soundtrack. Interestingly, the music was composed by Phil Orbanes, who is actually a board game designer and not a professional composer, but well done, Phil. Soundtrack slaps. Why is he wearing a yellow beret now? Sergeant Grey strangles the teddy bear, Madame Rose assaults him over it, and we learn that Sergeant Grey is a complete lunatic. Mrs. Peacock casually implies to Miss Peach that she's murdered at least 3 of her husbands when a scream is heard from the hall. Holy shit, someone stabbed the butler after he got back with pizza, and he wasn't even involved with the will reading and wasn't eligible for the money? Why would somebody do such a terrible... Oh, never mind, he's fine.
Just my little joke.
After the first chapter, we've seen a lot of the standard murder mystery elements in this plot. We've got the dinner party at the manor house, the stormy weather, the battle over inheritance, everyone is suspicious of everyone else, and there's no escape from our closed loop. So far, not bad storytelling for a board game. Now, let's see how Chapter 2 plays out. Chapter 2 opens the next morning. Madame Rose burns the will because she's afraid that everyone will be dead before she can hold her seance. Oh, did I forget to mention that her plan is to hold a seance and ask her dead brother's spirit who killed him? I know, sorry, there's just so much going on. It's revealed that Mr. Body and Mrs. White were having an affair. You'll notice too that all of the characters have injuries, like Madame Rose has a head wound, Monsieur Brunette has his arm in a sling, Mrs. Peacock is in a neck brace, Mrs. White has a cast on her leg. Are we to understand that they were all trying to kill each other all night, and now they're just casually sitting around the conservatory together? Anyway, it seems Mr. Body has hidden his previous will somewhere in the house, as you do, so some of the characters set off to find it while others just chill. Oh, and Monsieur Brunette's yellow beret has disappeared and he's back to brown again. Madame Rose turns on the TV and there is a very conveniently timed news report.
Special bulletin. An espionage agent working for a foreign power has been seen in the vicinity. Known as the Crimson Lady, this spy is believed to be armed and dangerous.
Miss Scarlet shoots the TV Elvis style, and Mr. Green and Professor Plum start destroying the house trying to find the will.
So we can change it, nitwit.
Back to the TV, and yet another news bulletin comes on.
Another special bulletin. The notorious sneak thief and suspected husband killer, Ma Bluebird, is now believed to be somewhere in the area.
So yeah, she definitely killed her husbands. The next news bulletin is that a patient from the insane asylum has escaped, and it turns out that patient is Sergeant Grey, but we don't know that yet. Madame Rose has a conversation with her teddy bear, who is also openly brandishing a knife. I guess he's worried about another attack from Sergeant Grey, and then we get some critical plot information. While they're tossing the house looking for the will, Sergeant Grey explains to Miss Peach that he has amnesia, was an orphan, and has a birthmark shaped like a candlestick on his leg. And he also reveals to Miss Peach that he's colorblind. Clever Miss Peach puts all this together, that Mr. Body was having an affair with Mrs. White, who was also colorblind, and she concludes that Sergeant Grey is their love child. By this point, Mr. Green and Professor Plum have become a sort of Laurel and Hardy comic relief duo as they search the house for the will. A little more banter adds to the espionage subplot. Monsieur Brunette corners Miss Peach, asking if she's seen his diamond-studded eye patch, and she explains everything she's learned about Sergeant Grey. Seems like they've had a plan to steal the inheritance all along. Green and Plum find Mrs. White's diary that contains all the characters' secrets, and they hatch a plan to blackmail the others. Okay, so we're about halfway through and we have a battle over inheritance, long-lost heirs, affairs, and now blackmail. Not to mention the espionage subplot and the very subtle subplot that Mrs. Peacock is a kleptomaniac. Here she is subtly lifting Brunette's briefcase in the last scene. I understand now why most of the comments on the video were things like, I always loved watching this even though I never played the game, and as a kid I just loved watching the tape, and this game is complicated AF, and Miss Scarlet arouses me. Yeah, the production values are pretty low and the acting is not Oscar-worthy, but I think plot-wise, it's actually a pretty dense and complex storyline. Back to the action now, and as it happens, Brunette knows exactly where the will is hidden, so he's obviously planted it there. He also seems to be moving his arms just fine, so what was with the sling? While everyone fondles their weapons again, Colonel Mustard mentions his Swiss Army knife is missing.
Has anyone seen my Swiss Army knife?
And Mrs. White is having a sex dream?
Body. Oh, body.
Oh, why? When Brunette finally reads the will, it becomes apparent that he's set the whole thing up so that Miss Peach, and therefore he, would get all Mr. Body's money. We get a few more bits of exposition here, most notably that Professor Plum is Mr. Body's son-in-law. So where's his wife? Well, that's explained later, but given Plum's proclivity for poison, I think we all know what happened to her. Anyway, to make a long story short, the will states that Mr. Body's long-lost child, who has a candlestick-shaped birthmark, gets all the money. Miss Peach, having already deduced that Sergeant Grey is likely the Body White love child, announces she has the birthmark and declares herself the heiress. Of course, there's something slightly amiss with this revelation.
Could have sworn we had a boy.
The butler appears again to announce the seance will start in 5 minutes, and no one seems confused or disturbed that just a short time ago they'd all thought he'd been murdered. Madame Rose goes around collecting items from the guests to help with the seance and starts spilling tea on everyone. Mr. Green is a con man, Professor Plum murdered his wife, as we suspected, Miss Peach is actually French, Mrs. Peacock is a kleptomaniac, and a few other minor things not particularly relevant to the plot, but then she drops a savage burn on Mrs. White for absolutely no reason.
You should never wear horizontal stripes.
Before the seance gets started, Miss Peach is poisoning Monsieur Brunette's eye patch. At the seance now, and the first spirits that come through are some of Mrs. Peacock's dead husbands, and they announce to everyone that she did, in fact, murder them. As a kid, this scene always scared me, but now, looking back, I realize how silly the whole thing is. Mr. Green casually holds on to the knife blade, and Brunette passes out with his eyes open. I guess because eye patch poison? And the disembodied voice of Mr. Body fills the room, but he doesn't reveal who killed him. Why is Colonel Mustard strangling himself? Well, Chapter 2 was quite the ride, but I'm sure things will make even more sense in Chapter 3, The Secrets. Miss Peach, in fear for her life, burns the will, but wouldn't you know it, there's a third will somewhere. Green and Plum are making ransom notes to follow through on their blackmail scheme. It also seems that everyone's injuries have healed. That's definitely one of the more odd bits of continuity. Like, why have everyone injured in the first place? It's never mentioned in the dialogue. It's not brought up as a plot point. It seems like they just strapped a bunch of bandages to the actors and had them get on with the story. Everyone gathers again, and Sergeant Grey makes a spot-on observation.
You know, we spend more time listening to wills.
So this will states that the person who can learn the most secrets about the others and reveal them to everyone will get all the money. Weird, but okay. Also, is Mrs. White sleeping again? I'm sorry, is this shit boring you, Mrs. White? Like, the discovery of your long-lost child, the battle over your lover's inheritance, the creepy ghost conjurings, and, like, the murder? What the hell was she doing behind that plant? So it comes out that Mr. Body had Mrs. White write down everyone's secrets in her diary, and since Green and Plum stole it, she's super pissed. Hey, the yellow hat's back.
I must get Plum's formula as soon as possible.
Oh yeah, stealing the formula. I'm glad you remembered, Miss Scarlet, because I sure as shit didn't. I guess after a couple of days of screwing around, she finally decided she better, get on with her mission. Luckily for her, it's clearly labeled formula, so it shouldn't be too hard to track down.
Welcome to our program.
Yeah, Mrs. Peacock definitely wants to that knife. After another conveniently timed news bulletin, the gang learns that Sergeant Grey is, in fact, the homicidal maniac who escaped from the mental institution. Remember that from earlier? Yeah, I know, it's a lot to keep track of. They decide to barricade themselves in the dining room, where Miss Peach reveals to everyone that Monsieur Brunette is her father and that they were working together to cheat them out of their inheritance, and that Sergeant Grey is, in fact, the long-lost Body child. They move to the kitchen next, where it's revealed Mr. Green is on the run from the mob and has $1 million bounty on his head. In retaliation, Green tells the gang that Plum murdered his wife, Mr. Body's daughter, but not for a good reason. You see, Plum was doing experiments on poison, of course, because this guy just loves poison, and he ran out of rats, so he used his wife. And that's pretty messed up considering this is a board game, but he goes on to say this.
She would have died anyway. Another 40 years or so.
Mrs. Peacock's pocket rips open and everyone's things fall out. She's been stealing from them. Oh, and Mrs. White confirms that Mrs. Peacock murdered all her husbands. Madame Rose and Sergeant Grey have this weird fight, and then it's back to the kitchen for more secrets. Well, Colonel Mustard getting turned and spills on Scarlet's mission. Then she spills on him, revealing he has a magnetized steel plate in his head, and no one will hire him as a spy anymore. He threatens to kill everyone and storms off. What is this? The story closes with everyone trying to kill each other again, so we're right back where we began. And that was Clue, the VCR mystery game. I think from a story perspective, it checked all the boxes of a traditional murder mystery. You have the closed circle trope, questions about murder, inheritance, and long-lost heirs. There are characters with shady pasts, all of whom appear to have motive, means, and opportunity to kill. While the numerous subplots like Mrs. Peacock's kleptomania, Miss Scarlet's espionage, Miss Peach being Monsieur Brunette's daughter, and Professor Plum murdering his wife, they don't add a ton to the main plot, but they do help to add some depth to characters that in a short story like this one could be at risk of becoming one-dimensional and only have a single trait like an Asian buffoon or like old lady. There are a couple of running jokes and some good attention to detail. Things like people finding candlesticks in random places throughout the film, Miss Scarlet denying everything when Colonel Mustard tries to talk about the old times.
Remember that summer in Sumatra?
I was never in Sumatra.
Just like that business in Borneo, remember?
I was never in Borneo.
Blackmailing me? Just like in Mozambique.
I was never in Mozambique.
And this part towards the end where we see Mrs. Peacock hand to Miss Peach the Swiss Army knife she stole from Colonel Mustard so Miss Peach can open a can. Also, Miss Peach eating a peach is a nice touch, as well as the visual gag where 3 different characters cut the same phone line. Speaking of comedy, there were a couple of cute little jokes thrown in throughout the video, which I always liked.
Well, I don't trust her. That's all I have to say.
You don't think we're having roast?
I am the butler, did it?
I think I have amnesia.
You have had it a long time?
Ever since I can remember.
A pair of brothers in Massachusetts spoke very highly of him, the Parkers.
If things get spicy, Mustard, I know I can depend on your help.
Stop winking at me, you oversexed Frenchman.
I wasn't winking, I was blinking.
I think the writing is pretty efficient, especially considering they had to weave in all these details to accommodate the gameplay. And when you look at the comments under the YouTube video, it says things like, well, I never played the game, but I loved watching the movie. That's kind of a testament to how well the story is constructed and how entertaining it really is. As pure entertainment, I think it holds up, especially if you're a fan of the so bad it's good genre, which, excellent story aside, the production of this video falls squarely into. Again, this isn't an Oscar-worthy production by any stretch, but it's definitely well done, especially considering it was made in 1985 when video production was expensive and time-consuming. Not like now, where any idiot with a phone and a strange obsession with a 1980s board game can make a video about it. If you're curious about VCR games, for sure read Brian Van Hooker's article in Mel, and if you're curious about the production of Clue, the VCR Mystery Game, Stand Still Pictures on YouTube made an excellent documentary about the game, the production of the video, and how it all came together. I definitely recommend you check it out. It is really well done. That's all for today, guys. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you next time.